If there's one class in Baldur's Gate 3 that never feels locked into a single role, it's the Druid. One fight you're healing and keeping everyone alive, the next you're turning the battlefield into a nightmare with terrain control, summoning allies, or shutting enemies down before they even get close. Sounds amazing, right? The catch is that Druids have a massive spell list, and once you factor in concentration limits, action economy, and how spells scale into the later acts, not every spell is as good as it looks on paper. Some are game changers, and others kind of fall off hard. So in this video, we're ranking Druid spells in Baldur's Gate 3 based on how useful they actually are across a full playthrough. We're looking at combat impact, out of combat utility, late game relevance, and how well each spell fits the Druid playstyle. Druids shine when they control space, support their party, and adapt to whatever the fight throws at them, not just by dealing damage, but by being smart and creative. The top tier spells fully embrace that identity, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which spells deserve a permanent spot on your bar and which ones you can safely leave behind. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking Druid spells in Baldur's Gate 3. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The Druid spells in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Produce Flame, Animal Friendship, Flame Blade, Gust of Wind, Lesser Restoration, Feign Death, Pass Without Trace, Plant Growth, Confusion, and Freedom of Movement. If there is one thing Baldur's Gate 3 teaches you very quickly, it is that just because a spell exists does not mean it deserves a place on your hotbar. Druids get a massive toolbox, but some of these tools feel like they were designed for a very different campaign, or a very optimistic idea of how fights actually play out in the city. Let's start with Produce Flame. On paper, a free light source and a small fire attack sounds handy. In practice, you are walking around Baldur's Gate, not a pitch black cave with no gear. A regular torch does the lighting job just fine, and the damage part falls off almost immediately. Spending your action to throw a tiny fireball when enemies are throwing real spells at you feels like bringing a candle to a dragon fight. Next up is Animal Friendship, which sounds wholesome and very druidy. Befriending beasts is great, until you realize how rarely that matters once better control and summon options unlock. Early on, it can save you from a wolf or two, but later, the spell just sits there, reminding you that charming animals is not exactly winning boss fights in Baldur's Gate 3. Flame Blade is one of those spells that looks amazing thematically. A fiery weapon made of pure magic should be incredible. The problem is that mechanically, it struggles to justify itself. Druids already have access to wild shape with extremely strong animal forms, and those forms hit harder, tank better, and scale more reliably. When turning into a bear solves more problems than swinging a fire sword, the blade tends to stay sheathed. Then there is Gust of Wind. Controlling space sounds useful, and sometimes pushing enemies around is fun, but in reality, there are simply better ways to control the battlefield. Other spells slow, restrain, knock prone, or completely lock enemies down. Gust of Wind feels like polite crowd control in a game that often rewards much more aggressive solutions. Lesser Restoration falls into the nice to have, rarely exciting category. It removes conditions, which is useful in emergencies, but it does not restore any hit points. And in Baldur's Gate 3, combat emergencies usually demand stronger actions like healing, damage prevention, or outright enemy removal. This spell ends up being something you remember exists only after the fight is already messy. Feign Death is another spell that sounds clever, but rarely earns its keep. It is extremely situational, and most of the time you have better defensive or escape options available. When things go wrong, pretending to be dead is usually less effective than simply not being targeted in the first place or turning into a very angry animal. Now, Pass Without Trace is a bit controversial. The effect itself is strong, no question about that. Boosting stealth for the whole party can enable some very sneaky plays. The issue is the spell slot cost. Druids are constantly competing for concentration and resources, and using a valuable slot on this often feels painful when combat-focused spells could end encounters faster. Plant Growth suffers from a similar problem. Movement denial can be powerful, but Baldur's Gate 3 offers other spells that do this job more aggressively and more reliably. When enemies can still find ways around it or ignore it, Plant Growth starts feeling like an overgrown speed bump rather than a true battlefield lockdown. Then we reach Confusion, a spell that promises chaos but delivers inconsistency. When it works, it is hilarious. When it does not, you just spent a turn and a spell slot for enemies to shrug and continue punching you. Compared to cleaner, more reliable crowd control options, Confusion is a gamble that often does not pay out. Finally, there is freedom of movement. It is undeniably helpful in specific situations, especially against heavy control effects. The problem is that those situations are rare enough that preparing this spell often feels wasteful. When your preparation slots are limited, spells that are only occasionally relevant struggle to justify their place. So yeah, these spells are not completely useless, but in the brutal, choice-heavy world of Baldur's Gate 3, they often get overshadowed. Druids have so many powerful, flexible options that these end up feeling like city clutter in an otherwise wild and incredible spell list. The Druid spells in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Poison Spray, Resistance, Shillelagh, Thorn Whip, Create or Destroy, Water, Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Enhance Leap, Longstrider, Dark Vision, Flaming Sphere, Heat Metal, Protection from Poison, Protection from Energy, Daylight, Sleet Storm, Contagion, and Greater Restoration's Windwalk. Some spells live in that awkward middle ground where they are not bad, but they are also not exciting. You cast them, they do their job, and nobody claps. That is exactly where the B-tier Druid spells in Baldur's Gate 3 sit. Useful, reliable, but constantly side-eyed, because something better is usually waiting one spell slot away. Let's kick things off with Poison Spray. Early on, it feels pretty solid for a cantrip, especially when enemies are clumped together and have weak constitution saving throws. The problem is longevity. As the game goes on, enemies get tougher, resist poison more often, and suddenly this spell feels like it missed the late game meeting. Resistance is one of those spells that sounds smarter than it feels in practice. Giving a bonus to saving throws can absolutely matter, but spending an action for it only makes sense when saving throws are the main threat. Most of the time, you would rather spend that action doing literally anything else, like controlling enemies or dealing damage. Then we have Shillelagh, the spell that whispers, what if your druid bonked things? It works, and for certain niche builds it even shines. But Baldur's Gate 3 druids usually have better plans than swinging a stick. When you can cast spells or turn into a bear, melee weapon optimization stops feeling like the dream. Thorn Whip is actually a really cool spell mechanically. Pulling enemies, breaking positioning, dragging them off high ground, that part is fantastic. The issue is action economy. Spending a full action for modest damage hurts. If you manage to get bonus action access through the Sorrow Staff though, this spell suddenly jumps from meh to oh, that's nice. Create or Destroy Water is all about synergy. When paired with lightning, cold effects, or environmental setups, it can be incredibly strong. The downside is that it demands planning. On its own, it does not do much, and without coordination, it just feels like you made the floor wet for no reason. Cure Wounds and Healing. Word are classic functional healing spells. They keep people alive, and that matters. Unfortunately, they are quickly outpaced by stronger options, better positioning, and the general Baldur's Gate 3 philosophy of preventing damage instead of reacting to it. You use them, but you are never excited to. Spells like Enhance Leap, Longstrider, and Dark Vision fall squarely into quality of life territory. They are convenient, they feel nice, and they absolutely help. But the spell slot cost hurts. When utility competes with combat power, utility often loses, especially on a class with so many good concentration options. Flaming Sphere is a classic early game workhorse. It deals steady damage, pressures enemies, and feels great when slots are limited. The problem is concentration. Late in the game, that concentration slot becomes extremely valuable, and Flaming Sphere starts losing its seat at the table to stronger, fight-ending spells. Heat Metal is hilarious when it works. Against armored enemies or weapon users, it can feel downright cruel. Against anything that does not use metal, it does absolutely nothing. That extreme swing makes it powerful but unreliable, which is exactly why it lands in B tier instead of climbing higher. Defensive spells like Protection from Poison, Protection from Energy, and Daylight all do what they promise. They are effective, clear, and helpful. The issue is that consumables often cover the same ground. When potions and scrolls can solve the problem without costing preparation slots, these spells struggle to stand out. Sleet Storm tries to do a bit of everything. Area denial, concentration breaking, difficult terrain, it is all there. The downside is that none of it is best in class. Other spells specialize harder and deliver clearer results, making Sleet Storm feel like a multi-tool in a game that rewards specialized weapons. Contagion is flavorful and thematic, but efficiency is not its strong suit. it is overshadowed by better debuffs and takes too long to matter in most fights. On top of that, spells from the School of Necromancy do not exactly align with a druid's narrative identity. From a role-playing perspective, it feels off, and mechanically, it does not do enough to justify that discomfort. Finally, Greater Restoration and Windwalk are powerful, niche utility spells. When you need them, you really need them. The problem is that those moments are rare. Outside of very specific scenarios, preparing these spells feels like insurance you hope you never have to use. So yeah, B tier spells are the maybe spells. They work, they have their moments, and Cargo would probably approve of half of them. But in Baldur's Gate 3, where every slot matters, maybe is sometimes just not good enough. The Druid spells in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blight, Guidance, Charm Person, Entangle, Fog Cloud, Ice Knife, Barkskin, Thunderwave, Cool Lightning, Moonbeam, Conjure Minor Elemental, Conjure Woodland Beings, Grasping Vine, Ice Storm, Polymorph, and Wall of Fire, Wall of Stone, Wall of Thorns, Sunbeam. There is a sweet spot where a spell does not completely break the game, but still makes you feel very smart for preparing it. That is where the A tier Druid spells in Baldur's Gate 3 live. These are the spells that quietly win fights, control chaos, and make nature feel like it is genuinely on your side. Let's start strong with Blight. Against plant enemies, this spell is absolutely brutal, borderline unfair. Outside of those matchups, it is still a very respectable burst damage option. When you need something deleted right now, Blight gets the job done without overthinking it. Then there is Guidance, which honestly might be the most pressed button in Baldur's Gate 3 history. This cantrip is always useful, always relevant, and somehow never feels outdated. Dialogue checks, exploration, skill rolls, it does everything. If Guidance is not prepared, something has gone terribly wrong. Charm Person shines brightest when conversations matter, and in Baldur's Gate 3, they matter a lot. Turning tense dialogue into friendly cooperation can completely change outcomes. In combat, it is more situational, but the flexibility it offers easily carries it into A tier. Entangle is the spell that teaches new players how powerful battlefield control can be. Early game enemies struggle hard against it, and watching multiple targets get restrained feels amazing. It sets the tone for how druids can dominate fights without just dealing damage. Fog Cloud is deceptively powerful. Heavily obscuring an area shuts down ranged attackers and spellcasters in a way that feels almost unfair. When enemies cannot see, they cannot hurt you, and suddenly the battlefield feels much more manageable. Ice Knife is peak early game efficiency. It deals solid damage, creates icy terrain, and even when it misses, it still explodes. That reliability makes it feel amazing to cast, especially when spell slots are precious. Barkskin might not sound flashy, but guaranteed armor class has real value. Early on, especially for squishier allies, this spell can quietly prevent a lot of damage. It is not exciting, but it is effective, and that counts. Thunderwave is one of those spells that becomes hilarious the moment there is a ledge involved. Solid area damage combined with knockback turns positioning into a weapon. In the right environment, Thunderwave is not just good, it is lethal. Cool Lightning really comes alive when paired with Create Water. Once enemies are soaked, this spell starts dominating longer fights. The scaling is solid, the repeat value is excellent, and it feels very on brand for a storm-wielding druid. Moonbeam absolutely shines in Act 2. Radiant damage matters a lot there, and the ability to reposition the beam each turn keeps pressure constant. It is one of those spells that keeps doing work long after it is cast. Conjure Minor Elemental and Conjure Woodland. Beings follow a simple rule. More bodies on the field is almost always good. Extra summons soak actions, deal damage, and create chaos for enemies. It is efficient, effective, and very hard to argue against. Grasping Vine is all about positioning. Pulling enemies into bad spots, hazards, or kill zones feels incredibly satisfying. It pairs beautifully with terrain-based strategies and rewards players who think a turn ahead. Ice Storm is what Sleet Storm wishes it could be. Reliable damage combined with area denial makes it a fantastic mid to late game option. It hits hard, controls space, and does not ask too many questions. Polymorph is crowd control through pure comedy. Turning a terrifying enemy into a harmless sheep never stops being funny, and it buys your party precious time. Underneath the humor, it is genuinely powerful control. When it comes to big environmental spells like Wall of Fire, Wall of Stone, Wall of Thorns, and Sunbeam, this is where druids feel like battlefield architects. These spells reshape encounters, punish poor positioning, and reward smart planning. Used well, they can decide fights before enemies even realize what is happening. A-tier spells are the backbone of a strong druid in Baldur's Gate 3. They might not always steal the spotlight, but they consistently deliver results. When you prepare these, nature does not just answer your call, it shows up ready to win. The Druid spells in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Goodberry, Insect Plague, Speak with Animals, Mass Cure Wounds, Enhance Ability, Hold Person, Spike Growth, Dominate Beast, Stone Skin, Conjure Elemental, Planar Binding, Heal, and Hero's Feast. Some spells do not just help you win fights, they quietly explain why the Druid exists as a class in Baldur's Gate 3. These are the spells that never fall off, never feel wasted, and somehow stay relevant from the moment you unlock them all the way to the final stretch of the game. This is peak nature magic, guided by Sylvanas himself. Let's start with Goodberry, because this spell is honestly criminally underrated. Outside of combat, it gives you efficient healing and free camp supplies, which already saves resources. Inside combat though, it becomes a bonus action lifesaver. Picking someone up when they are downed or barely standing without spending a full action is absurdly valuable. The flexibility alone earns this spell a permanent spot in S tier. Insect Plague is pure battlefield domination. Massive area, heavy damage, difficult terrain, and disadvantage on perception rolls all rolled into one angry cloud of bugs. Enemies clump up, you drop this, and suddenly the fight feels over. It does not just slow enemies down, it actively punishes them for existing in the wrong place. Then there is Speak with Animals, and this one is non-negotiable. Entire alternate solutions, jokes, hidden lore, and genuinely memorable moments are locked behind this spell. Playing a druid without it prepared means missing content, full stop. And yes, the ability to talk to Scratch and the owlbear cub alone makes this spell worth preparing every single day. Mass Cure Wounds is what you cast when everything goes wrong. Wide area healing that scales well into late game encounters lets you stabilize the entire party in one action. It does not feel flashy, but when multiple allies are bleeding out, this spell feels like divine intervention. Enhance Ability is incredible both in and out of combat. Advantage on ability checks turns dialogue, exploration, and Baldur's Gate 3's many puzzles in your favor. It never stops being useful, and that kind of consistency is exactly what S tier looks like. Hold Person becomes completely absurd as you level up. Paralysis guarantees critical hits in melee, and against humanoid enemies, this spell can instantly flip a fight on its head. When it lands, enemies do not just lose a turn, they lose the encounter. Spike Growth is one of the best terrain control spells in the game. Enemies can genuinely die just trying to walk toward you. Pair it with forced movement, choke points, or bad enemy positioning, and suddenly, the battlefield itself becomes your strongest weapon. Dominate Beast might be the most "this is Dungeons & Dragons" spell on the list. Turning powerful creatures against their allies feels amazing, fits the druid fantasy perfectly, and offers excellent action economy. It is strong, thematic, and incredibly satisfying to use. Stone Skin brings massive defensive value, especially in Acts 1 and 2. Resistance to non-magical physical damage cuts incoming punishment dramatically. When your concentration is otherwise free, this spell can make frontliners feel nearly unbreakable. Conjure Elemental is always good. Summons deal damage, soak hits, control space, and force enemies to split their attention. No matter the fight, adding another powerful body to your side is never a bad decision. Planar Binding sounds powerful because it is powerful. Turning extraplanar enemies into allies can completely reshape encounters. It is high impact, situationally game-changing, and absolutely worth occupying one of Baldur's Gate 3's limited spell slots. Heal is the ultimate panic button. Massive single-target healing trivializes emergency recovery scenarios. When someone is one hit away from death, this spell simply says no and resets the situation. Finally, Hero's Feast sits comfortably among the strongest buffs in the entire game. Bonus hit points, immunities, and advantage on wisdom saving throws make encounters safer before they even begin. Casting this feels like preparing your party for war rather than just another fight. These S-tier spells are not just strong, they are identity defining. They show exactly why Druids in Baldur's Gate 3 can be some of the most powerful, versatile, and rewarding companions in the game. When these spells are prepared, nature does not just support you, it carries you. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.